What do we want? Freedom. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Freedom. When do we want it? Now.
Hi, everybody. Back to TV on our new show, Act Now, where we're covering activism, marches, rallies, what's happening, what's still happening after people leave the street, our wins, our losses, and all of that stuff. So thanks for tuning in. Today, we're going to be covering the latest in cannabis legislation activism, which we all know has to do with just access to healthcare, the prison industrial complex, voter disenfranchisement, like specifically Black men who have gone to prison for minor drug infractions, like, selling marijuana to the woman down the street who has glaucoma. That is an offense to society for sure. Meanwhile, of course, the people who, are pushing OxyContin, they don't get their voting rights removed from them. In fact, nothing happens to them. Although we have some good news on that front. 6 states just filed lawsuits against the maker of OxyContin for the misleading and aggressive advertising that they believe is fueling the opioid crisis, which is costing their states money. So until it starts costing people money, no one does anything about it. But either way, some states are now doing something about it. So we'll see what happens there. Also on today's show, we're covering the many protest actions following in the wake of the U.S. moving its embassy to Jerusalem. Here's a clip from the If Not Now rally in Washington, D.C., held earlier this week.
The opening of the embassy of occupation in Jerusalem today negates the Palestinian struggle for self-determination, their right to freedom, safety, and dignity. It is yet another act of blatant dehumanization.
That's why we're out here today, where we will be taking to the streets of Washington, D.C. and building an embassy of freedom. Teaching young Jews the lie that Palestinians are inherently dangerous is violence.
Stop the violence! How many more Palestinians have to die before our community ends our support for this violence?
Not one more! Say it with me!
Not
One more! Not one more! Not one more! Not one more!
We're going to Okay, and we're back. Sorry about that tech glitch, but okay, so let me tell you about what was happening, what we were covering a second ago. Net neutrality, huge win for activists, lovers of, the open, free internet had a big win. The Senate voted to preserve net neutrality rules that basically keep the big telecom industries from being able to clamp down, from being able to run the internet as we know it. So huge win there. Of course, tyranny never sleeps. So we can celebrate for a brief moment and then continue our work hot off the heels of that win in the Senate. Basically, we need to continue to pressure our elected officials to do the right thing in the House of Representatives. So, otherwise the FCC is going to let Comcast and Verizon ruin the internet with throttling, censorship, these expensive new fees they want to put in. And of course, the companies, Verizon and Comcast, they say, just roll back the rules. We'll still follow the rules, but you should roll them back just because, libertarianism or something. We don't need rules. But if they were going to follow the rules anyway, what's the difference whether we roll them back? I mean, how can you trust like Comcast? How can you trust these big telecom companies? They say, trust me. You can't even trust them to come between 10 and 2 to fix your stuff like they say they will. Anyway, make your call. Today's call to action is to make your call, to make it easier, you can go to battleforthenet.com. It's a great website that is tracking all of this stuff where you can write emails in, and it actually gives you like a list, a rundown of the elected, here it is, like you could see it. The elected officials who are on board are in blue, the ones who are not on board are in red, and it also lists the amount of phone calls that these people have gotten, the amount of letters that these people have gotten. So make sure to pressure those in your district and congratulate and continue to pressure those, even if they have already agreed that they want to keep net neutrality rules. If you can't do that on the internet, again, it's battleforthenet.com. You can just call the U.S. Capitol switchboard, 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121, and say that you would like to keep net neutrality rules in place. This is bipartisan, people. There are many, many Republicans. I mean, the public support for net neutrality is enormous. Whether we're going to get our elected officials to be elected to serve the public is, yet another matter. Okay, turning to our main topic today, cannabis legalization. Last week, New Yorkers marched in favor of cannabis legalization. There was a march, a parade, and a march, and a rally to demand that a legal cannabis market be open for responsible use now. We've got we have some great footage to show you of the cannabis parade, but we'll get to that in a second. I want to show you some excellent clips we have of some of the speakers from the stage. Cynthia Nixon spoke. You may know her from her role as Miranda on Sex and the City, or her current role as running for governor of New York on a very progressive platform. Let's take a look at her clip of her speaking from the stage at the cannabis legalization rally.
I'm Cynthia Nixon, and I'm running for governor of New York State. And I don't know whether you heard this or not, but I want to legalize cannabis in New York State. And I want to do it first and foremost because it's a racial justice issue. If you are Black or Latino, you are 10 times more likely to be arrested for cannabis than if you are white. And that's not right. That's not what we believe in New York. And that's not what we should believe in the United States of America. It will follow you for the rest of your life, that arrest, and it will make it harder for you to get a job, and it will make it harder for you to get a place to live. And if you are undocumented it will put you in the crosshairs for deportation, and we don't believe in that in New York State. Cannabis, arresting people, particularly people of color, for cannabis is the crown jewel in the racist war on drugs, and we must pluck it down. We must expunge people's records. We must get them out of prison. And when I am governor, and when we legalize cannabis here, we will be sure to prioritize those communities of color for the licenses to sell cannabis.
Listen.
Oh, that was our next guy's coming up is Immortal Technique, the musician. He is fantastic. But that speech by Cynthia Nixon, where's Governor Cuomo saying, that cannabis is a racial justice issue? He hasn't said anything like that as far as I know, and he is probably going to try to run for president against maybe Trump, which hopefully he'll win. But still, I would prefer as progressive a candidate as possible. Now, this next clip is from the stage Immortal Technique. He is, if you don't know him, you should definitely look him up. He's a musician and very powerful speaker. Check out what he had to say.
Listen. I work with a lot of different political organizations. And whenever I talk to my brothers and sisters that say they're allies on the left, I always remind them of something. That the people of Central America, South America, Africa, I respect a lot of the philosophies that I see, but we didn't actually need someone to come to the dark jungles of Latin America and Africa to teach us the complex concept of sharing. We knew what that was. We know what sharing and collectivism was before Marxism. We knew all of that. We can go back thousands of years about our people and our indigenous culture. And I must say something else. There may have been problems back then, but you know what we never did as indigenous people? We never charged somebody their life savings for fucking medicine. We never tried to put somebody in jail for self-medicating and curing their children of cancer by giving them droplets when the chemotherapy is destroying your child's inside. I know that we're all obsessed with ignorant comments that are made, with stupid shit that people say in the media, but remember that it's always a distraction because we're not having the most important conversations, ladies and gentlemen. What the fuck is going on in Puerto Rico? What the fuck is going on in our country, ladies and gentlemen? We will continue to fight for the rights of every individual. I love y'all. Thank you very much.
Sometimes it takes so many.
And that was Immortal Technique coming from the stage of the Cannabis March and Rally for legalization of cannabis in New York State, which just happened last week. We also have Justin Strickle coming to you. He's the political director from National Normal, an organization that works to get cannabis legalized. So let's take a listen to what he had to say live from the stage.
Right now, we look around, there's something in the air, and it's something that's not legal. And what we're not seeing is we're not seeing arrests. Right now, over 20% of this country lives in a legal market where individuals can go from place to place without worrying about being harassed, without being worried about being thrown in jail for having a dime bag in their pocket. That's incredibly important. At the federal level right now, we have the votes to end marijuana prohibition. We have the votes in the House of Representatives. We have the votes in the Senate. What we do not have is the political will and leadership of the gatekeepers in our representative republic. But we're getting there. We're getting there thanks to the leadership demonstrated by your own senator, who took a long time to get there, but he only got there because of the work of committed activists like yourselves, committed activists like Empire State Normal and CCA and the Drug Policy Alliance and so many others. So we are right now experiencing the death rattles of prohibition. And in the death rattles of prohibition, what happens next is incredibly important. It's what kind of an economy do you want to see? Do you want to see a concentrated economy with very few number of companies that look more like the people down on Wall Street? Or do you want to see the business owners be more reflective of who's here?
That was Justin Streekel from National Normal talking from the stage at the cannabis rally in New York City. We also have, there were so many amazing people there. It was hard to pare down the speakers that we're able to bring to you, but we wanted to spend some real time on this to try to move the discussion away from, oh, cannabis, it's a moral issue, to it's a racial justice issue. It is an issue of access to healthcare. It's basically a justice issue. So let's keep the focus on that. And we're going to go to listening to an interview we were able to do before the march and rally of Jumaane Williams. He is a city councilman in Brooklyn here, and he's also running for lieutenant governor under Cynthia Nixon. We only have a couple minutes of his speech to play to you. It's not his speech, of his interview he did with us to offer to you, but the whole thing was so powerful. It was basically, he has been elected under the guise of being basically an activist who got elected and not necessarily a politician. So I like that he has that distinction, and I hope more people like him start taking office. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about cannabis legalization.
You know, sometimes it takes so many people just to catch up to what's right, and people don't do what's right just for its own sake. They have to have the politics behind it, and they have to have polls and all that junk. And it's very frustrating because I've never been one to do policy by polls. I've done policy by what's actually right to do. And the legalization of marijuana has been right for decades. And actually people know that. And so across the country, we have been decriminalizing it for the very same reason that folks are now saying legalize it. People just didn't want to cross that hurdle for whatever reason. They wanted to hold on to some fake sense of morality. But now we're moving in that direction. New York City and New York State likes to claim to be a progressive mantle in this country. And now they're lagging behind, which is often happens more often than people would think. But when we talk about the legalization, we have to also talk about it obviously as a social justice issue. One of the things I want to make sure continues to be talked about, not often enough, if we're legalizing it, we need to go back and expunge the records of many of the people who may be either in jail or have criminal records for selling something that everyone knows was decriminalized and we're not going to be legalizing. And it's very important that remain a part of the debate. One thing we should do is not what we did in New York State. We passed a form of legalization, medical marijuana, very limited. In some cases, they took out the part with even being able to smoke. It's very weird. But they put something in there that says if you have a criminal background, you can't even take part in benefiting from selling it, which is ridiculous. And so we have to make sure that there's no barriers to being accessing the ability to sell this. And so what we're maybe creating is having put people in jail for selling marijuana, now legalizing marijuana, maybe not expunging their records, and not allowing them to sell the thing that is now going to be taxed and sold. So people who are trying to feed their families and put food over their head, again, will be locked out of doing something legal and may have to find something else. So let's think of this as a holistic approach. We are now viewing these things so much different, but sometimes when it comes to poor communities, Black and brown communities, we don't see the equity that we should. And so we have to provide the resources that bring people up to equity. One is going to make sure they're not barred from participating here. And obviously, when you let people out of jail, you have to have resources that help them reintegrate into society as a productive resident.
Can you enlighten the audience in any way about why the right is now starting to embrace this issue?
You know, that's a good question. I'm sure that many folks have ulterior motives. For right now, I'm just going to try to accept it what it is, because they also are coming around to understanding that prison is not the answer and should not be equated with public safety, so that those debates are moving in the right direction. I mean, I believe facts are going to make a comeback at some point. And so maybe this maybe this wave of just you can't even argue against the information that's out there about how cannabis legalization will benefit everybody. It's just hard to argue it. And so the huge wave that's coming forward, maybe they're just tired of fighting it. But I wouldn't be surprised if their folk, their millionaires, billionaires, hedge funds, are now trying to find a way to make massive amounts of money off of the thing that they forced people in jail from, and they profited while they were in jail as well. So we have to make sure that the communities that were hit the hardest during this, fake, well, it was a real drug war, but it wasn't really about drugs. Now that we're changing that, those communities have to be able to benefit. As a matter of fact, if we want to talk about equity, they should probably be the first in line to benefit, not the ones that are being prevented from benefiting. Well, first I want to say, as being an activist elected official, I was very proud that we can show that we can be productive. 2 years ago, City and State, which is the trade publication of the politics in the state, listed me as the most productive council member out of 51, only after the speaker. 48 pieces of legislation, very hard pieces of legislation affecting the budget. And so I want to push that out there to encourage people who think they can't do this, that you can, and you can be productive. What's happening in the state and this country around cannabis now, it is activists and people on the street who made this happen. Don't lose sight of that. Don't let politicians come in and own it. Don't let them change it and try to make it something it's not. In the words of my Jamaican brothers and sisters, legalize it. That's it. That's all we have to do. We can tax it. We can regulate it. We want to expunge people who have records and allow them access to sell it so they can provide for their families as well.
So after it's legalized, do you believe it should be regulated?
Of course. It is a substance. When we're doing this, we have to do it responsibly. So people sometimes try to take that out of the people who say legalize it. It is a substance. It does have an effect on the body. It needs to be regulated, just like alcohol is regulated. It can't be something that's out there rampant. We have to make sure minors and people who shouldn't be having access to it don't. And so the only issue is people can never explain why we're regulating and allowing the sale of alcohol and are not doing that with cannabis. And so it has to be done in a professional and a way that's responsible for its impact on the community. But that has nothing to do with the real push to make sure that we legalize.
Gee, I sure would like to see him win that lieutenant governorship and continue to move up the ranks. It's fantastic. Jumaane Williams, that's who that was. He's up and coming. So I'm glad to bring him to you. Nelson Guerrera is the next interview that we were able to do. He's from the Cannabis Cultural Association, and this is what he had to say.
Cannabis Cultural Association, or CCA for short, the good CCA, is the 501c3 nonprofit based here in New York. What we're really about is empowering, educating, advocating for people of color to get involved in the legal cannabis industry and space. We focus a lot on ending the stigma and creating some social justice change as it pertains to cannabis and people of color. Because unfortunately, we make up the prison system when it comes to the plant, but don't make up the legal industry, and that's what we're really trying to change. So, a lot in the media when it comes to cannabis, it's usually the bong, the big giant joints. The reason the CCA got involved this year with the parade and rally is to try to change that narrative, to actually put a different face on this movement going forward and make it really about social change, to get people active, to get politically involved and create change that really needs to happen around this plant. That's what our organization strives for, and this year specifically is to really change that message that, look, this is a movement, and it's more than just about getting high at the park. This is about creating a change and sparking it here in Cannabis Cultural Association, and make it really about social change, to get people active, to get politically involved, and create change that really needs to happen around this plant. That's what our organization strives for, and this year specifically is to really change that message that, look, this is a movement, and it's more than just about getting high at the park. This is about creating a change and sparking it here in New York, because what New York does, the rest of the world seems to follow. If we can really start changing that message, our legislative administration will hopefully do right by the people and legalize this plant here in the city and get our brothers and sisters out of jail. Cannabis has been used systematically for the last 80 plus years to arrest black and brown folks, unfortunately. It's for minor arrests, and here in New York, we have thousands of people getting arrested at a disproportional rate. If you're African American, you're 6 times more likely to get stopped for consuming cannabis. If you're Latino, like myself, you're 4 times as likely. And depending on which neighborhood you live in, it's on the officer's discretion, even though we do have decrim here in New York. At an officer's discretion determines whether or not you're going to be arrested and brought downtown. And, cannabis arrest is a misdemeanor or felony in most cases, and that can really hurt you when it comes to housing, scholarship opportunities, and really can affect you going forward.
Again, that was Nelson Guarino talking about legalization of marijuana. If you're interested in getting involved in his organization, of course, it's called the Cannabis Cultural Association. Cannabis Cultural Association. You can find them online. I just want to let you know that if you're watching live here on the Facebook page, you can leave comments in the stream just below, obviously, this video, and we may read them on the air. So don't write anything that you don't want us reading on the air. And also, if you like this stream, send it to other people you think they may like it. That really helps us to be able to produce this program. So our program is called Act Now. It's new, and it is basically about activism, what's happening with the issues that you love on the street and behind the scenes. And I'm Juliana Forlano, and I'm going to be hosting it. And as you can tell from my voice, I'm very excited about it. Now we're going to move on to the If Not Now rallies that happened this week in the wake of the Trump administration's movement of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. I am going to just let the speaker from the protest in D.C. do the rest of the speaking about this event.
This week, what Trump is doing by moving this embassy is a stamp of approval for endless occupation, for the denial of freedom and dignity to all Palestinians. A couple weeks ago, I was in Israel and Palestine with 15 other leaders in If Not Now. And it was before the violence in Gaza started. It was before Jerusalem Day, which is taking place yesterday, before the embassy is moved today. And I got a chance to see what it looks like to live under occupation. Not when there's violence, not when there's war, or there's always violence, but not when there's visceral, clear, explicit violence, but the violence of what it looks like to live under occupation every single day. We went with a couple of Palestinian farmers on their own land in the South Hebron Hills, and 4 or 5 of us escorted them at 6 a.m. in the morning so they could take their sheep just to shepherd their own land, so that we could make sure that they didn't face violence from settlers. Settlers who are part of my people, the Jewish people. And they didn't, but they were stopped by multiple policemen and military. What it means to live under occupation, even when you're in your own land, it means that you're taking a risk just to be alive every single day. Later that week, I celebrated Passover with my family in northern Israel, and I tried to explain to them what it was like. And the dissonance was so painful. I love my family, and I know that my family escaped violence and pogroms and ended up in Israel, and that made them safe. And here we were, making another people not safe, even to be with their own sheep, with their own land. And what did that mean? I feel that this risk we're taking to be visibly Jewish and be visibly anti-occupation will not be a risk for very much longer. It's something that will become the new norm in our community if we can take leadership first. But I want to honor all of those who are leading our community now with us, with me. And I want to say that in that moment with my family at Passover, I realized it wasn't just a risk to tell them that I was against the occupation, that this needed to end. It would have been a risk not to. Because I care about my family, I care about the Jewish people, and I know that our safety, our security, the soul of the Jewish people depends on us leading our community forward. The occupation is a daily nightmare for Palestinians, and it is a moral disaster for those who uphold it and support it. And this week, young Jews across the country are going to stand for freedom, dignity for all people. Thank you all so much for being here.
And that was the If Not Now rally in Washington, D.C. There were rallies all over the country, which were quickly put together in the wake of what's happening. And I think under the current administration and what we're seeing, where there's attacks on all fronts, people are generally just basically ready to come out and have their voice heard. So if you care about something, if there's an issue you're passionate about, make sure you're connected up with other like-minded members and have a plan for when Trump attacks what you hold dear. And with that, the organization March Against Monsanto is having its 7th International March Against Monsanto. It's a grassroots campaign. There's going to be global events this Saturday, hundreds of cities on 6 continents. The idea is to further educate and raise awareness about Monsanto's GMO seeds, the toxic food supply that they are creating, as well as their merger with the German pesticide, GMO, and pharmaceutical giant Bayer. What could go wrong there? You could go for more information about what's happening in your own city, and if you want to get involved, to marchagainstmonsanto.com, marchagainstmonsanto.com. I know here in New York City there is one, and again, there are cities all across the world who are marching against Monsanto. If you go to their website, marchagainstmonsanto.com, you will see headlines that will just make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, like don't let the FDA pass misleading fake GMO labeling laws. Trump nominates former Monsanto environmental attorney to lead toxic waste dump cleanup efforts. A new Argentinian study links Monsanto chemicals to miscarriage and an epidemic of birth defects. It's bad. So let's work on it. I'm Juliana Forlano. You are watching Act Now, Act TV's new series focused on activism. If you're participating in any actions or would like to have them announced on our show, you can leave them in the comments of this particular episode for next week, or you can email me at juliana@act.tv. Make sure to like our stream and share us with your friends. That is how we are able to continue bringing you this information and bringing you this work. And please make a comment under the video. Thanks so much for watching. Join us again next week when we'll cover all the action.
When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Freedom. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Freedom. When do we want it?